All right, so picking it up where we left off last time, remember that we were using Jdbc to connect to a database, and I showed you that you can create a connection as long as you've got a URL, a username, and a password. Make sure that you're always closing your resources, though, because again, if you open up 30 persistent connections, then the 31st one will fail because you are limited to only 30 connections. The next step, of course, is to create and prepare our query. If it's a select query, which is what we're going to start out with, then we need to process those results. And this is all done with, we've already done a connection, we're going to prepare a statement, and then we're going to process a result set, right? And it's called a set because it's unordered. When you pull stuff out of a database, unless you, even if you use, order by or limit or whatever it is, right? Then it's inherently unordered, right? So we're going to execute the query and process those results, and then we're going to clean up our resources as we're going along. Because a prepared statement and a result set are still resources. They could be opening up another connection that under the hood that needs to be cleaned up, okay? All right, so the tasks that I want to start out with are as follows, right? Let's go ahead and say load up a person based on their UUI or on their person ID, right? And then we'll also want to load up all persons, right? Maybe we'll also want to load up a person by another criteria. If I come over here and I load up a person, select everything from person, right? What's one clear way that I could retrieve a person record is based on their person ID. Remember that was called a surrogate key because it was generated by the database. It has no real connection to the person. It's just for the database managed keys, right? The other way that I could search for a person is through their UUID. Remember that's called their natural key, right? And that's the way that we designed this table. You could, of course, search for a person by their last name or first name or something, but it's going to be, we're going to start out with these two first, okay? So let's load up a person based on their UUID, right? Their person ID, their UUID, and load up all persons. And by the way, don't forget their email addresses, right? Eventually, we're going to tie this into, assets as well. So we would want to load up all the assets that they own. But let's go ahead. We have to have a starting point somewhere. Okay. All right. So do I want to do that all in main? Probably not. Right. Single responsibility principle. Remember, is Jdbc demo responsible for loading up data? Nope. Let's go ahead and create a new class. Right. Called. Well, what should we call it if it loads up data? Data loader. I like that. Data loader, right? And by the way, if we had a data loader that was loading up from CSV files, now is a perfect time to maybe redesign it. Data loader for CSV files. Data loader for databases. Database data loader, right? And maybe they all implements data loader, right? Where all you have to do is create one or the other and replace one line, dependency inversion, remember? So if you're switching from assignment 1 and 2 and 3, where you're loading up from CSV files, for assignment 4, 5, 6, you're loading up from the database instead, right? But I'm not going to go that far. We'll just go ahead and go with data loader here, okay? All right, so the first one is going to be a public static person, because I'm going to return a person, load person, based on their person ID, which is an integer, okay? I need a person to be able to return it and then return eventually that person. That means I need to import these because I moved everything to a different package, right? Something that you should also start thinking about now that your project is getting a little bit more complicated is reorganizing your files, your source files, into different packages, okay? Just make sure that you're using the com.synco for the ones that you have to put into that package for the grader. Right? All right, I need to load up this person. Well, what is my outline going to be? I connect to the database. I prepare the statement. I process the results. I clean up my resources. Right? All right, so I've already got a connection. And again, you're going to be doing this over and over and over again, so you might as well put it somewhere else, a connection factory. And that's going to be required. You're just putting it into another method, right? That's required for your bonus, right? All right, create and execute the query. So what query do I want? Usually when I'm doing JDBC stuff or, I'm mixing in SQL code with actual code, I like to have both my IDEs up here in order to write the query over here and execute it to know that it's syntactically correct, and then copy and paste it over into my code. I'm going to want the person and all their emails. So select everything from person, P, join, in fact, join or left join, email E on P dot person ID is equal to E dot person ID. Right? So if I do that for all of the records, I'm getting a record with myself with 2 emails. Jeff Burke over there has 1 email. Didn't we put in a test data where there was a person with 0 emails? Yeah, because that was a good idea, right? We want to test all of those possibilities. So I'm not pulling them over though. What should I do instead of a regular old join? Left join, right? And now I'm getting John Smith with no emails at all, okay? Well, if I was just doing this for one person even, I would have a where clause, person ID, let's just go ahead and go with my record there. Person ID is equal to 1. Oops, there are multiple person IDs. What should it be? P dot person ID is equal to 1, right? Now, imagine that I did it like this, where I'm pulling over all of the records of all of my emails. Say I had 10 emails. I would be pulling the UUID and repeating it 10 times. Right now I've only got 2 emails, right? But I'm pulling the person ID here. I'm pulling the UUID. I'm pulling the last name and first name, and I'm doing it for every single email that I have, right? That's not that big of a deal here because there are only 2 records, 2 times however many bytes. This 4 bytes here. This is 36 bytes here. This is, 10 bytes. So you're only pulling over 60 or so bytes needlessly for every record. But what if I had dozens of records, hundreds of records, 1 million records? Do you want to pull across duplicate records for every single one of those? Not a good idea. Remember that networking is your biggest bottleneck. Networking is still the slowest thing you can do in computing, next to I/O, of course, right? But networking is even slower because it's across a network. And that's exactly what I'm doing here. I'm pulling data from a server sitting over in the basement of Nebraska Hall somewhere, right? All across the wire. If I was doing this off of campus, by the way, you'd have to use a VPN to connect. And now you are making it even slower because it has to go over a wire off campus, but also you have the complexity of the VPN on top of it, right? If you eventually do, when you eventually do Lab 12, which is a parallel and distributed computing version of this, where you're opening up many connections at once in a connection pool, and you're inserting hundreds or thousands of people records, you will start to notice it. When I did it, benchmarked it from home, to insert 1,000 person records took me over a minute. Why? Because I was doing it in serial, and I was opening and closing a connection every single time, and I was doing it over a VPN. Super, super slow. Let's not make that mistake here. I don't want to select everything. What do I want to select? Let's just select the stuff that is relevant to a person. Select everything from person, P, right? Just leave it like this, where person ID is equal to 1. That's just me, right? What's wrong? Present. Person, thank you. All right, there we go. Now I'm only pulling over 1 record. I don't have any of the email data, but I can take care of that later with another select statement, right? So there's the query that I want to execute. String query is equal to there, right? And all I had to do is cut and paste it because I know that it's syntactically correct because I did it in my SQL Workbench and I tested it before I copy-pasted it, okay? There's my query. I now need to prepare that query. So remember that we've already got a connection. The next thing is to have a prepared statement. So prepared statement, and I'll just call it PS for now, is equal to con.prepare, prepare statement. Con.prepare statement. There we go. And I'll pass it the query there, right? This is also in the Jdbc library, java.sql, so I need to import it. But I'm facing the same problem that I had when I tried to create a connection here. That it forces me to surround it with a try catch because these SQL exceptions, they're all checked exceptions. So let me go ahead and surround that with a try catch. Fine, right? I'm just going to work in this one block here. Remember, catch and release is how you should do it, right? There is no way that you can return from a bad query, like if I misspelled select or something like that, right? There's no way that you can write programmatic code to recover from bad programmatic code, right? So, PS, okay? Now I need to execute that statement. ps.execute execute query, query, right? That will return a result set that I'll call RS, right? Once again, you need to import this stuff, okay? All right, that looks something like this. Right? If I did it over here in MySQL Workbench, it looks like this. It's a table, right? Now, if there are multiple things, if there are multiple records returning from here, I would need a way to, let me get rid of that where statement. I would need a way to iterate over each one of these things, and that's what the result set is. It's kind of like a scanner, remember? While you have another line in the scanner, read the next line, process that line. So we could put this into a while loop that would look something like this, while rs.next. All right, there we go. And syntax, there we go. All right. So what this is going to do, if I've had 4 records, initially it's pointing to before the first record. rs.next will advance me to the first record and return true, because right now it is pointing to a valid record. rs.next on the next iteration will point to the second record and return true again. Third, fourth, true, true. On the next iteration, it will now point after the last record and return false, breaking me out of this while loop. Right? But I'm not loading up everyone. I'm only loading up one person. Right? So there are only 2 possibilities here. The person exists or they don't. Right? Because you gave me a person ID that was -9 or something. Right? So instead of a while loop here, I'm going to use an if-else statement. We are going to use while loops later on when we load up everyone. But right now for this one, they either exists, or they don't exist. Right? If they don't exist, what should I do here? What could I do? So remember that I do need to return a person. If that person doesn't exist, what could I return? I could return null, right? That's one option, right? What's another option? It's a little bit more object-oriented. Like what? Like person with, like, we call this kind of a dummy value or a sentinel value with null values everywhere. And we could do that. What do we do with error handling, though, in Java that we don't do in C? We throw exceptions. New runtime exception, or an illegal state exception, or whatever you want. Person record with person ID equal to 1 does not exist. Right, there we go. I like that a lot better because it'll blow up in our face and we'll know it for sure, because it throws a runtime exception that we can catch if we want to, and if we don't catch it, then it'll be fatal to the entire thing. Otherwise, they exist. Okay, and I'm pointing at that record right now. So now I need to process the record. Let's come down here and let's look at this again. I need to grab the UUID. I need to grab the first name. I need to grab the last name. So rs.next, that goes top to bottom on the records. Now what I do, now I'm on one row and I need to go column to column. All right. That's going to be a string last name is equal to rs.getString, the last name. Now, do you remember I told you that we should be following the same casing conventions as we did in our Java classes? Why? There's no guesswork anymore, right? The last name column corresponds to the last name in the person class. The first name, rs.getString, I don't even have to look at my database, my ER diagram. I know that I called it first name, right? Get the first name, right? What else do I want? The UUID. String UUID is equal to rs.getString, because there are no UUID column types in MySQL. So I need to convert that over to the proper UUID though, right? By the way, if you did this, we didn't take off points in your project, but you certainly shouldn't have done that. What should you have done? There's a UUID class that's built in, right? And that's what you should be using. That is equal to UUID dot from string and then the UUID str. So I need to rename that now, str. Okay. I've got the UUID. I've got the last name. I've got the first name. Right. Let's go ahead and build our person now. Person or P is equal to new person, given the UUID last name, first name. There is no constructor like that, is there? Why? Did my initial design have a UUID? Nope. So redesign, refactor, private UUID. Right? There we go. And what should I do? Let's go ahead and let's just copy paste this. You can generate the code using the fields if you want to. Do UUID. This dot UUID is equal to UUID. There. Come on. Oh. I need to import it. Java utils. There we go. All right. Now I've got my person. Should I immediately return P? What's down here that, that's now dead code. I was not closing my resources. All right. So don't return here. Where should I return? After I'm done with everything. Okay. But also, I have resources here that are not being closed. Result set, that's a resource. The connection is a resource. The prepared statement is a resource. Close them immediately after you're done using them. rs.close. Am I immediately done using it at this point? No, I'm definitely using it for this if statement here. So that goes at the end. All right, there we go. And then ps.close. All right. Why did I go in that order? I opened up a connection, then a prepared statement, then a result set. If you're going to close it, what order do you close them in? The reversed order. Right? Result set, prepared statement, and then down here, the connection. All right. Let's see if this actually works. Load up a person based on their ID. Person me, let's say, is equal to data loader dot load person, and I'm ID 1, I think I was, right? And I could run it, but I also want to visually verify it. So let's go ahead and print me out. Print ln me. Okay. Hey, it's me. Cool. Did I ever actually load up the emails? No, and there's not a visual cue here that I didn't. So now I have another reason to redesign my person class over here. Right? This toString method that did the last name, first name, let's also now include the UUID in parentheses. And then we'll go down to the next line, right? And so what I'm going to do is string result is equal to, right? And then let's go ahead and concatenate all of the, in a nice, nice formatted manner here, for string email in this .emails, right? I will say result, concatenate, and then I'll tab over so it looks nice, plus email, plus, and then I'll go to the next line so that each one of them is on their own line. Return result. There we go. All right. I am positive I have some emails, right? That is, in fact, my UUID that was in the database there. But where are my emails? My email addresses, right? We never actually loaded them, all right? So what I could do is I could go ahead and do that inside of this if statement here. I could create another prepared statement that does that for me. Or you know what? Single responsibility principle applied to methods. Right? This method loads up a person. Might it be nice if we had another method that loaded up the emails of a person? Okay, let's do that. In fact, I'm going to make this private, static. Void load person emails, and we'll take a person P. I will offload that responsibility to another method because I want, remember unit testing. Generally, you want units to be as small as possible. because you want to isolate bugs and issues, right? Especially now that we're dealing with database stuff. Because if you've got a connection and you open up a connection there and open a connection there, open up a connection there, and you've got a method that is like 100 lines long, 200 lines long, it's going to be very, very difficult to find out where you didn't close something. So keep your units small, okay? I'm going to do the same basic thing here, but so copy pasta, cardinal sin, but that's okay, right? I know what I'm doing. Maybe not, right? All right, connect to the database. Like I said, this should probably be in a separate function, right? What's my query now? Given that I have a person ID, I need to load up their emails, right? So once again, let's come back over here and select everything from email where person ID is equal to 1. Now I'm only pulling over the email addresses. Well, wait a second. Do I actually need the email ID? No. Do I need the person ID? I gave it to you, database. I gave it to the database, right? So let's not select everything. Let's select only what we need. Address from email. That looks a whole hell of a lot better, right? Okay. All right, so there's my query. And by the way, I am hard coding 1 here. We're going to come back and fix that. Because do you only ever want to load up one person ever? No, right? All right, so my prepared statement now looks like this. My result set looks like this. It's no longer an if do you have one email or no emails at all. It is now how many emails do you have? So while you still have an email, go ahead and pull the address from the address here, right? And now that person, I don't create the person. Instead, I say p.add email address. There. And I don't need this else here either. Because what if there are no emails? That's perfectly fine. There are records with no emails there. It just means that the while loop won't run. We will immediately close our result set, close our prepared statement, and return. Remember, it's a void function. All right? Okay. Load person emails down here now. Right? So once I'm done with loading up all their data, right? We can get rid of this. Let's go ahead and call that with person P. Right? That's why I made it private, because I don't want you to be calling this unless you're inside this class already, right? Does it work? I got all my emails now. Those aren't my emails, by the way. Remember, that was generated by Makaru, right? So it's just, CBS News and Delicious. CBS News and Delicious right there, right? Okay. All right. Does it work for person 2? Person 2 is Jeff Burke, and he's only got 1 email. Oh, I'm still getting myself. Why? Because I hard-coded 1. So let's come back and fix that. Okay? All right. So I don't want to hard-code it to 1. I want to use that person ID up there. If you ever find yourself doing what I just did, punch yourself in the face and remind yourself to never, ever, ever do that. Right? Ever, ever, ever do this. I'm using string concatenation here. Don't do that. That opens you up to what are called SQL injection attacks, right? Which is the #1 avenue for attacking websites still to this day, right? We're not going to do that. We're going to do it correctly. Question mark, I don't know, right? That's called a parameterization. That question mark will be replaced with the actual person ID by the prepared statement. ps.setInt. The first one will set that to the person ID. Okay? Now, unfortunately, it does not start at 0. And unfortunately, it does not have named parameters. That's something that modern systems do, like JPA has. So we're stuck with this. If I had many question marks here, like question mark, question mark, question mark, it would be 1, 2, 3. I only have 1 question mark here, so it's only 1. Okay? All right. No other code changes, and now I'm pulling Jeff Burke. But I didn't make the same change over in the load emails function, right? So let's do that now. Change this hard-coded 1, and by the way, I have a hard-coded 1 down here as well. So let's get rid of that, ++ person ID. It is perfectly fine to do string concatenation for your exceptions, because there's no injection attack here that can happen. Okay. All right. There it is. All right. So can I do the same thing here? ps.setInt 1 to person ID. There is no person ID in this context. I gave you the object person, right? So I could redesign this and I could say int person ID instead, but I don't like that. I like object-oriented programming better because here's the person, here's the entire object, the first name, last name, all the information that you would ever need, except for person ID. Do you see a person ID here in the person class? No. Should there be a person ID here in the person class now that it has a connection to the database? Absolutely. Private int person ID, right? However, there are instances in which we've created people for authors of books that did not have a connection to a database. So what's a better way of doing this? Big I integer. Because for those that have no connection to the database, the value will be null. For those that do, the instances that do have a connection to the database, it'll be set to the proper person ID that's out of the database, right? Once again, let's create another constructor. For this one, I will go ahead and go to constructor using fields, no emails, but everything else, right? So I don't know if you like that, that order. I don't like that order. Person ID should go first, but make sure that you are also still initializing your emails. DRY principle, don't repeat yourself. I see a lot of repeated code here, a lot of repeated code here, a lot of repeated code here, right? At this point, maybe we should think about this a little bit differently. One of these constructors should be calling another constructor to do everything. Which one of these is the most general constructor? The one at the top that takes everything, right? So I'll leave this one, and what will I do here? I will hand this off to the other constructor. This UUID, what about the person ID? That should be null, right? Last name, first name. There we go. And last name, first name, here the UUID is going to be null, right? Isn't that a lot better? I don't have a bunch of repeated code everywhere, right? I remember that this keyword refers to a constructor, and so this is the most general constructor that you can have. All right, that's a little bit better. I like that. Now I don't have a person ID. Instead, I have p.getPersonID. I also have to do getters, by the way. Should I do setters? No, never setters. Prefer immutable objects. So let's generate setters. Come on, where's source? There's source. Generate getters and setters, only getters. There we go. It doesn't regenerate what you already did. All right, there we go. Nice. Now over here, I've got the ID. Careful, we didn't update this code down here, right? We're still calling that old constructor. So now I need to put in the person ID. Right? Do I need to get the person ID up here from the result set, by the way? We were given that as part of the input. We would not be in a result set if that was not a valid person ID. Okay. All right, does it work? Jeff Burke, there we go, printfriendly.com, right? And that is indeed his email if I select all the email. Person ID 2, printfriendly.com, C Cubbin or whatever it is, all right? All right, does it work for that person with no emails? I think John Smith. There's John Smith, no emails. It works. Does it work for a non-existent person? Yep. Remember, person record with person 4 does not exist. We threw an exception in that case. All right. Cool. All right. How else would you want to load up a person? By their UUID. Right? So let's come over here. Let's go ahead and grab this. And once again, I will commit us in and load copy paste, but not by their UUID, but not by their person ID, but instead by their UUID. Okay. Should I name this differently? Load person by UUID. I heard a nah, right? Why? I mean, it's object-oriented programming. We have, what is that called? Method overloading, right? We can use the same name. Right? The parameter that you pass it implies how you're loading it, either by the UUID or by the integer person ID. Right? Don't rename it. Right? All right, so instead of this query though, where what? UUID is equal to question mark. And this will be UUID, toString, because UUID is an object. And it's no longer an integer over here, it's set string. Right? Do I need to pull the UUID? Nope, because I was given that as part of the input. What I do need to pull though is the person ID. rs.getInt person ID. There we go. There we go. Otherwise, no changes. Very, very few changes. Now you might think, you know what? There's here we need to change this for here. UUID. Right. You might think, oh, you know what? There's a lot of repeated code here. Sometimes you can't get past it, right? You could go further and try to make this combine this into one method to rule them all, load it by whatever criteria I give. That's going too far, right? That's making it overly generic to try to bend over backwards to only have to write one method, right? It's okay to repeat code sometimes, right? You don't want to generally repeat code that, say, loads up emails, right? Because I just reuse that in two places. When I loaded them up by their ID, and then again here, where I'm loading them up by their UUID. Let's grab a UUID. Let's grab my UUID and come over here and test it. Right? Actually, not my UUID. Let's go with Jeff Burke there. Right? I don't know any Jeffs in my family, by the way. I'm just making up names. Right? It's not like I'm making fun of a cousin or something, right? Jeff is equal to data loader dot load person, but by their UUID dot from string there. And then let's print out Jeff. All right. There we go. Is that my, I guess that's my UUID. Did I not copy correctly? Come on, copy. Paste. Oh, nope. Come on, can't I want to copy you. Copy. 8B, okay, no, it's not allowing me to copy. Copy field, fine. The quick key is not working for some reason. And then put single quotes, we don't want those single quotes. There we go. Now do we load Jeff? There we go. There's Jeff. Printfriendly.com. All right. Cool. One more exercise here, right? Let's load up all the people, all right? So that means I'm going to get a list of persons, right? Everyone is equal to data loader dot load persons. I'm not going to give it an input here because I want to load up everybody, right? Is that a good name? Load person, load person, load persons? I think so. Load people, load everyone. Not as good. Right? There's no ideal, by the way. Again, two hard things in computer science, naming things and cache invalidation. Right? All right, let's come over here to the data loader. I think we can get this done today. Right? Private, static, list of person, load persons. There we go. Right. I could outline this and I could load up. I could, instead of selecting star where everyone, using a where clause like I was using over here, what I would do is I would end up looking at something like this. Load up everyone, then load up everyone, for each one, load up their email address, et cetera, right? I could do that all in one shot here, but you know what? I want to reuse some of this code here. Don't repeat yourself. Right? What if I just load up all person IDs, right? Then call load person by their ID, right? Person ID. Right? Wouldn't that cut down on a lot of code? Right? Yeah. Okay. So let's go ahead and once again, copy paste. There's my connection. Immediately, what should you do before you forget? Close the connection after you're done using it. So at the end here, there we go. I guess the first thing I should have done is create a list of persons. Results, result is equal to new array list of people. All right, and then I return the result down here. All right, there we go. All right. I've got my connection. Let's select all the person IDs. String query is equal to select person ID from person. That will give me all of the person IDs, right? And let's go ahead and copy this, right? Because we're going to have the same basic pattern. You'll find yourself doing a lot of copy pasta. Just be careful, right? All right, so prepare the statement. I do not have a question mark here, so I'm not going to end up setting anything. Result set, execute query. Now, for each one of these, I'm going to pull the person ID. So int person ID is equal to rs.get int person ID. Right? And then I can use that person ID to create a person. Person P is equal to load person by person ID. Once I've got that person, I can add them to the results. And by the way, the connections that load person is creating, it creates another connection to load up emails. Each one of those functions opens up their own connection. Therefore, they are responsible for closing their own connections. Right? Yeah, I'm loading up one for this function, one for the load person, one for the load email, but that gets closed every single time. So at most, you only ever have 3 connections open at once. There are better solutions to this that you will explore in Lab 12. Brand new lab this year, by the way. Let me know how you like it. I thought it was fun. Right? It was fun to create, at least. Right? It's a connection pooling, which we'll talk about here eventually. Right? Close your result set, close your prepared statement, and I already did that, right? And then close that. All right, so let's get rid of that. Let's come back over here. Come on, why load person? What's wrong? Oh, did I make it private? Weird. Let's see, where are we? Load. Okay. I don't know where I put it, so let's go ahead and go to there. Oh, why did I make it private? I don't know. Let's make it public. There we go. All right, and once I've got everybody, I didn't forget their email addresses, right? For person P in everyone, right? System.out.println P. There it is. Now remember, I'm printing out me and Jeff at first. But then I'm printing everybody else out. John Smith, Jeff, and me again. Why is it in that order? That's the order that it came out of the database, right? If I want an ordering on this, what do I need to do? Sort it, right? Yeah. So collections.sort everyone. Is it going to let me do that? Yeah, why? Remember when we created the person class? We made it comparable. Right? That little tiny amount of investment that we made in a good design is now paying off, right? Because now I can have sorted people. How are they sorted, by the way? It looks like last name, first name. So let's come back over here and run this again. And you'll see that it is Burke, Chris, Burke, Jeff, John Smith. Neat, right? See how that stuff comes back to pay you dividends later on? The opposite is technical debt. You're taking out a loan on your future time because you have a bad design. But if you invest some up front, then it pays you back in the end. Okay? By the way, what should we have been doing this entire time? To do documentation. Right? And also, this should have documentation. Right? Cool. We went way faster than the last class here. All right. All right. Anything else for people? Well, we can go on to assets, but what else do I want to do with people eventually? right? That's just a select statement. What if I wanted to insert people? Insert into person. Their last name, first name, UUID. All right, what else is there? Values, and then to do for a UUID. Let's go with somebody else. I don't know. Turing, Allen. There we go. And all in print. There we go. All right, that'll work. Except that to do is not a valid UUID. Right there. Now, if I select all the people again, I'll see that Alan Turing there is with the to do and no email addresses. Right? Again, I'm working in my SQL Workbench here, which is fine for test data. But what do you want over here? You want to be able to programmatically insert people. If I were to create a person, Turing, right, is equal to new person, and their UUID is to do UUID.random UUID, and then a Alan or Turing Alan. There we go. Now what I want to do is I want to save Turing, Mr. Turing, Dr. Turing, whatever you want to call him, to the database. ... So should I do something like data loader dot save person, and I'll pass along Turing here. Single responsibility principle. Should the same class be responsible for loading data and saving data? Probably not. Single responsibility principle. Should the data loader class be responsible for loading up people by their ID, by their UUID, by their emails, and by the way, loading up all people? That seems like 4 things to me. That's going a little bit too far, right? Yeah, maybe in an ideal world you would have these all separated out into different classes. No, right? As long as you are loading people in in whatever ways you're doing it in one class. In fact, for your project, as long as you have one data loader class that loads up people, companies, invoices, invoice items, whatever else you need. If all that's in one class, that's fine, right? All right. Otherwise, it's going a little bit too far. The reason being is I'm going to show you a better way of doing this that I only show the honors class, just because it's an extra thing called JPA, and it's a way that you don't have to write all this boilerplate code anyway. Right? I'll just demonstrate it. You're not actually going to use it for your project though, unless you want a big giant headache. Right? So not data loader. What class should be responsible for saving people? Data what? Saver? Okay. We technically call this what? Writing, or in the world of databases, we call this persisting. Persistor. I don't know. Persister? No, it's kind of like a robot. So it's a persistor, right? That sounds more robotic, right? All right. So data persistor, right? And in this, we're going to have public static void save person. Person P. Now I want to call it persist person, person P. It's okay if we call it save person though. You understand what it is, right? Now we're not going to have time to do this today, but let's start thinking about thinking ahead on what could go wrong. Well, what could go wrong right now? Alan Turing already exists, right? I didn't have his UUID at the time, but what else could go wrong? The person ID could exist. Am I going to save the person ID? No, I'm going to let the database auto-generate that for me. But I do need to know whether or not this person already exists. We can do that much today. Why? Data loader dot load person by their UUID. Right? Now, if that throws an exception, then we know that that person doesn't exist. So I could surround this in a try catch, or I could come back and say, wait a second, that's not very useful, right? Does not exist, right? Well, at least with this one, right? Now I have a reason. Initially I thought, well, okay, it'd be good to throw a runtime exception here to make it blow up in your face because that's not something you should have asked for. But now I have a reason to redesign it, refactor it, right? Return null. Your original idea of returning a null value to indicate that person does not exist. By the way, that's what belongs in your documentation. Loads data associated with the given ID, UUID from the database and returns a person record, capital P person record, corresponding with that UUID. Returns null if no such record exists. That's exactly the kind of thing that you want to see in your documentation. How does this behave, right? Without having to read it. And that means over here in my data persister, I can now check this. Person, if this is what not equal if not equal to null, then the person exists. What should I do now? Again, I could throw an exception, or in this case, since it's a void function, just simply return. It's a no op, no operation, right? So if the person exists, just return. Put that into your documentation. Document this, right? That it will be a no operation if the person with that UUID already exists, right? Otherwise, to do next time, implement this, right? There we go. That's what where we'll pick it up on Friday because it's Wednesday right now, right? All right. Any questions? No? All right. Then I'll see you on Wednesday or Friday, whatever.